Welcome to a country where the desert knows the scent of Chanel and modern SUVs line up in front of marble-lit mall pavilions. Qatar, a state smaller than a Polish voivodeship, with ambitions bigger than a continent. Here, advertising isn't an add-on, it's a story, a manifesto, a declaration of presence on the world map. In Qatar, you don't make ads to sell something. Here you create ads to prove something, that we exist, that we are the best, that we deserve to be seen, that we can be quiet and loud at the same time. Some ads look like they were taken straight from Paris Fashion Week. Others resemble trailers for Hollywood blockbusters. But the most important thing isn't the special effects, it's the emotions they evoke. Because Qatar doesn't want you to buy something. Qatar wants you to desire something. The psychology of the Qatari audience? Wealth that's hard to fit into a spreadsheet. A culture that must not be trivialized. A society that watches TikTok but also reads poetry written 1,000 years ago. How do you advertise in such a world? A slogan isn't enough. A discount isn't enough. A catchy line isn't enough. In Qatar, you need to create a legend. How does the architecture of emotions look in Qatar? When they were building the stadiums for the 2022 World Cup, no one asked, how much will it cost? They asked, will it be Instagrammable? Qataris know the world doesn't look unless you give it a spectacle. That's why advertising in Qatar doesn't say buy. It says, look at us because we are the future. When a luxury Italian brand wants to enter the Qatari market, it doesn't put up a billboard. It rents a museum and organizes an evening with perfume, desert soundscapes, and a drone show. When the government wants to promote a new district, it doesn't send leaflets. It sends an email to CNN, BBC, and Bloomberg offering an interview with a minister. When a small local startup wants to attract an investor, it builds an app that tells the story of Bedouin traditions, personalized for the taste of modernity. Advertising in Qatar is an event, a story, a ritual. In Qatar, you're not allowed to be crude. Billboards are carefully placed. No random banners, no screaming neon, no walls of sale graphics. Here, a billboard must be beautiful, classy, elegant, like a woman in a chador, covered but hypnotic, like a sheikh, restrained, but with power in his eyes. Qatar itself is a campaign. Qatar Airways, Al Jazeera, Aspire Zone, Qatar Museums, Qatar Foundation, the Government Communications Office. These are not just institutions. They're pieces of a puzzle with one goal: keep Qatar in the world's consciousness as a country of knowledge, innovation, culture, and prestige. Their ads don't look like ads. They're mini-films, can-worthy productions, stories full of traditional rituals, futuristic technologies, and children running across the desert in slow motion, carrying the flag of hope. Not everything worked. Advertising can lose too. But careful, Qatar, despite billion-dollar budgets, also has failures. Campaigns that were too European didn't touch Qatari hearts. Promotions for imported products that ignored local cultural codes ended in boycotts. Even Al Jazeera had moments when it had to pull controversial content under foreign pressure. Advertising in Qatar means walking a tightrope between global glamour and local sensitivity. If you don't understand that balance, you lose before you begin. Why does this matter? Because Qatar is a laboratory for the future of advertising. There's no mass market like in India, no freewheeling chaos like in the US, but there is something the world is increasingly craving: elegance, selectiveness, visual poetry. Whoever understands how advertising works in Qatar understands how premium marketing will look in 10 years. Who actually buys in Qatar? Qatar is a land of paradoxes. The population is under 3 million, but only around 10% are citizens. The rest is the world on contract. Engineers from the Philippines, cleaners from Nepal, designers from France, traders from Lebanon, managers from the US, and self-declared experts from Central Europe. They all work for one thing: the luxury machine called Qatar. But when we talk about the ad market, we have to ask some brutal questions. Who actually has the money here? Who decides what gets bought? And who is the real target of these campaigns? The Qatari citizen, A client like no other, a true Qatari is an inaccessible client. He earns more than most Polish millionaires, but doesn't flaunt it openly. He drives a luxury car, but without a flashy license plate that gives away his status. He lives in a villa with a pool, but behind a high wall. He believes in modernity, but values his father's word. And that's why any advertising aimed at a Qatari must be symbolic, refined, and deeply respectful of tradition. Perfume campaigns don't show women undressed. Watch commercials don't talk about conquering the world, but about inherited dignity. Car ads don't blast the sound of the engine. They whisper the sound of the desert. Advertising to a Qatari is a poem, not a slogan. Expatriates, the quiet majority, and the loud consumption expats are the backbone of the consumer market. They're the ones who go to the supermarket every day, buy cars, vacuum cleaners, smartphones, training courses, English classes, airline tickets, cat food, and oat milk lattes. They're the ones who click, like, share, and post product photos on Instagram. But they're not a monolith. An expat from India doesn't react like an expat from the US. A Filipina domestic worker doesn't see the same campaigns as a German woman working in a bank. A Syrian barber, an Egyptian technician, and a British lecturer, that's 3 different purchase universes. And yet, they are the main engine of trade. That's why campaigns in Qatar are often in 2 or 3 languages, targeted based on browser language and behavior. Arabic, for locals. English, for the rest of the world. Malay, Hindi, or others, depending on the product. And the government? As a customer, it's ideal and unpredictable. This is where the real weight lies. Qatar doesn't just buy ad services, it commissions them on a state level. The Ministry of Tourism announces a tender for a campaign to attract 2 million tourists from Asia. Qatar Foundation looks for an agency to build a Harvard in the Desert storytelling arc about education. Qatar Airways orders a spot to be shown between Champions League matches, with a budget bigger than the yearly spending of some European political parties. But here's the warning: Qatar hates repeats. You don't want to be the agency that delivers what we've already seen. You have to predict the future. Surprise them. Create something CNN and Al Jazeera will want to show. And at the same time, something that won't offend a conservative cleric. B2B clients, welcome to trade fairs, the temples of advertising. In Qatar, people don't buy off the shelf. They buy at fairs, exhibitions, dinners, and conferences. B2B advertising isn't a banner. It's an expo stand. It's a PR feature in state media. It's being an official partner of an education event sponsored by the Emir. B2B marketing is also more than a campaign. It's documentation, translations into Arabic, reputation strategy, and a letter of praise signed by an ambassador. Qatar likes to buy from those who understand local hierarchy and can sell themselves before they sell a product. The new player? The influencer from abroad. They earn a few $1,000s per story. They fly in from all over the world. They tweak TikTok's algorithms, and they say, "Hey Doha, let's collab." Influencer marketing in Qatar is its own planet. Not everyone works. You can't show too much skin. You can't show alcohol. You can't show a questionable lifestyle. But once you understand that, you can build a campaign that reaches the entire Gulf at once, spreading like myrrh in a censer. In short, the Qatari market isn't wide, but it's deep. It's not about millions of customers. It's about billions in contract value. Whoever gets access to one Qatari gets access to his network. Whoever grasps expatriate emotions gains clients for decades. Whoever learns to speak Qatari, not just in Arabic, but in a narrative, story-driven, elegant style, can win this market without an office, without a billboard, without a newsletter. A story is enough, because in Qatar, everything starts with a story. What is forbidden in Qatari advertising? In Qatar, you cannot show everything. But what you can't show often says more than what you can. Here, the line between advertising and an offense to morality is as thin as silk from Souk Waqif. While in New York, an ad can shock, and in Paris, it can provoke, in Qatar, it must soothe, calm, and never trample on the sacred. Because here, it's not only the law that decides what is allowed, also culture, religion, the emir's family, and an invisible boundary of taste, something that only a few truly know. Rule 1. The body, covered desire. Let's start with the biggest taboo, the body. In Qatar, you won't show a woman in a swimsuit on a billboard. You won't even show a bare knee. And if you do, the billboard will disappear overnight. No explanation. No fine. It just vanishes. This isn't a joke. In 2021, a famous clothing brand had to change its entire campaign because the model's arms were bare above the elbow and her gaze into the camera was considered too bold. But that doesn't mean there's no sensuality. There is symbolic sensuality. Instead of a bikini, desert mist. Instead of cleavage, a glance through a veil. Instead of nudity, a detail that merely hints at closeness. Because in Qatar, suggestion sells more than explicitness. Rule 2, religion, sanctity that always watches. Here, religion isn't confined to mosques. It's part of daily life. You can't put a flippant campaign on a billboard right next to a mosque. You can't use Quran recitation as part of a commercial soundtrack. You can't use religious symbolism, even accidentally, next to everyday products. For example, you cannot show a half-naked model standing beside Islamic architecture. Breaking this rule doesn't end in a fine. It ends in a blacklist. Your brand can disappear from public space and never come back. But there's opportunity too. Educational campaigns that show harmony between faith and knowledge are welcome. Ads that highlight family and spiritual values or connect to Ramadan and fasting can expect state media support. Rule 3. Alcohol and pork, the invisible characters. These are not just taboos, they are bans. You cannot show in an ad alcohol, even non-alcoholic beer if the bottle resembles beer, pork meat, even soy sausages with pork flavor, any party suggesting drinking, even Western style. Exception: exclusive, closed-door events, accessible only by invitation, promoted softly or via European influencers posting from undisclosed location. But in public space? Topic closed. Rule 4. Propaganda, history, and politics. Slippery ground. You may not. Refer to political conflicts. Use foreign flags in a purely advertising context. Show elements linked to revolution, war, or protests. In Qatar, everything has to be clean, cut off from global chaos. Yes, this is a form of censorship, but it's also framed as protection of social peace. Peace campaigns supporting dialogue, children's education, or scientific progress are highly encouraged. Rule 5. Premium aesthetics. The ban on kitsch Qatar is one of the few countries where an ad can be rejected simply for looking cheap. Seriously, if your campaign uses too many colors, uses fonts like Comic Sans, looks like a 2003 PowerPoint slide, then even if it's legally fine, it can be rejected by the local Advertising Aesthetics Council. Because here, even a sale notice has to look like a page from Vogue. What is welcome? If you want to advertise in Qatar, you must know not only what is allowed, but what is advisable. It pays to create campaigns showing education, family, harmony, commercials with subtle symbolism, lighting, traditional music, spots based on local history, architecture, values, and to feature Qatari influencers, covered but expressive, children, always shown respectfully and safely, luxury, but without arrogance. In short, advertising in Qatar is not free. But it's not in chains either. It is guided by a value system you have to learn. Because here, knowing the legal rules isn't enough. You must know the unwritten rules. What you can't do is not just a set of prohibitions. It's guidance. It's a map. A cultural cipher. Crack it, and the market opens its doors. What should the language of a campaign sound like? In a world where your message must pass moral, class, and cultural censorship, language becomes more than a communication tool. In Qatar, it's an access code. To the market, to respect, to money. There is no single version of an ad. There are parallel versions, and none can be a simple copy. Each needs to be its own story. Arabic, the language of emotion, dignity, and self-censorship. Arabic in Qatar is the language of prestige, religion, state institutions, and national pride. But not every Arabic will do. It's not enough to know Syrian or Egyptian Arabic. You need the Gulf flavor, and ideally, classical Arabic, Fusha, with a subtle local tone. Arabic ad copy cannot be trivial. You can't use lowbrow jokes. You can't use street slang in a campaign aimed at Qataris. You also can't shorten words in marketing SMS like 2MRW or please. Here, even newsletters are written as if edited by a minister of culture. The best slogans feel like poetry. Lines about pride, about roots, about the future. Phrases written with the rhythm of desert wind and the gravity of lineage. English, the language of expats, business and global prestige. English is Qatar's second language, though in practice, it's often the first. It's how workers from the Philippines, India, Nigeria, Poland, and Canada communicate. It dominates malls, airline ads, LinkedIn, and the finance world. But that doesn't mean any English works. American slang doesn't. British humor doesn't. Google Translate definitely doesn't. What works is simple, prestigious English, no idioms, lots of proper nouns, Qatar, Doha, Gulf, Expo, Vision, narratives full of ambition and aspiration. In premium campaigns, English must not be the cheap language. It has to sound like the language of dreams. Hindi, Urdu, Tagalog, the shadow languages of power. Who works in Qatar? Mostly people from South and Southeast Asia. Indians, Pakistanis, Filipinos, Nepalis, Bangladeshis. They build, clean, deliver, and serve. Are they advertised to in their own languages? Unofficially, yes, but not on billboards, not in premium ad spaces, only in SMS campaigns, local services ads, WhatsApp banners, in-app placements, Talabat, Kareem, and others. Hindi or Tagalog in ads become languages of survival and practicality. Hindi ads, loans, cheap shops, free data bundles. Tagalog ads, beauty services, Filipino food promos, community events. This is not the glamorous market, but it's a market of millions. And then there is the visual language. Above all languages, in Qatar, as in Dubai, the most powerful language is the visual one. Delicate gold, emerald green, desert white. Symbols: the Arabian horse, the falcon in flight, the pearl fountain. Visuals cut like Christopher Nolan shots, but with a soundtrack that sounds like prayer. In ads, looks and glances often say more than words. Campaigns that nail the visual language work on everyone because they hit universal emotions: elegance, prestige, respect, the quiet before success. But there is one more language, the cultural one, not written in any alphabet, not available in Google Translate, visible only to those who understand, how you sit on a carpet with an emir, when you can joke, when you must be silent, what the smile of a woman from the Al Thani family means, and why the sound of water in a commercial can say more than 1,000 words. In Qatar, an ad has to be translated not just from one language to another, but from one mindset to another. Even the best copywriter from New York, if they don't know the local code, can create a campaign that is culturally unreadable. In short, in Qatar, a campaign is not a translation. It's an adaptation of meaning, values, symbols. It's poetry and technology in one. Because here, every word must mean more than it literally says, mean less than it could say, and mean exactly as much as the audience is ready to accept. In the language of desert, luxury, and silence, it's not a tagline that sells. It's a story that offends no one, yet reaches everyone. How did Qatar show itself to the world in 2022? It wasn't just a football tournament. It was the most expensive billboard in the world. The 2022 World Cup in Qatar cost over $220 billion. But the most important investment wasn't in stadiums. It was in the imagination of the world, in how Qatar would look in the eyes of billions of people on every continent. That's why Qatar's ad campaign didn't begin on opening day. It started a decade earlier, and it was planned down to the last pixel, frame, poster, and sound. The World Cup was framed as a national campaign. For many countries, football is a sport. For Qatar, it was a soft power tool. 8 stadiums were built, each an artistic and symbolic project. Every promo spot for the tournament said more about Gulf culture than about football. Every event blended advertising, diplomacy, narrative, and poetry. The campaign was aimed at the Western world but told the story of a proud East. Without shouting, without aggressive messaging, but with a clear statement, we are different, and we are ready to host you, but on our terms. The World Cup spots, masterpieces of PR and emotion. This wasn't your usual come and see or feel the game marketing. Spots by Qatar Airways, the Supreme Committee, and Visit Qatar were like miniature films. Style, Hollywood plus Orientalism. Pace, slower than a Nike ad but deeper in meaning. Motifs, fathers and sons, sand and light, the falcon and the mosque, tradition and VR. One of the most famous spots, a boy running across the desert, finding a golden ball, then greeting players from all over the world as guests in his home. A nod to fairy tales and mysticism blended with modernity. The emotions, hospitality, pride, innocence, openness. Qatar Airways, sponsor and national brand. Qatar Airways wasn't just transporting teams, it was telling a story. The airline spots were full of 3D animation and CGI, starring top footballers, styled somewhere between Disney and BBC Earth. Most importantly, they didn't just promote the airline, they promoted Qatar as an experience. You're not flying to a World Cup, you're flying to a world you've never seen. The desert as a stage, Qatar knew it didn't have waterfalls or jungles, but it had silence, minimalism, and light. The entire visual narrative of the tournament was built on gold of the sand, silver of metal, white of fabrics, blue of the sky and flags. Desert minimalism became marketing power. Qatar didn't try to pretend it was Brazil. Instead of samba, it gave poetry. Instead of shouting, gestures. Multi-channel communication. Socials, apps, PR. During the World Cup, Qatar acted like a global ad agency. Influencers from around the world were invited to create content. TikTok was flooded with Manur Qatar Welcome, Arab World Cup, and similar tags. Events were live translated into a dozen languages. Instagram pushed architecture, fashion, food, museums. It wasn't just sport. It was a global repositioning campaign for the national brand. Controversies as part of the strategy? There were accusations, human rights abuses, worker deaths, bans against LGBT communities. But even that became part of the calculus. Qatar didn't try to smooth everything over. It responded with a narrative, we are different, but hospitable. It was a subtle defensive campaign, not based on denial, but on showing children playing football with women, highlighting educational projects, spotlighting charitable foundations. They didn't dodge the crisis, they redirected attention. Long-term effect, after the World Cup, Qatar increased tourism by around 300%, secured investment contracts from Asia and Africa, strengthened its position as a soft power player in the Middle East, entered global pop culture vocabulary. It was the most successful national campaign of the 21st century, and the budget is only part of the story. The key was that Qatar told its story in a way no one had ever told the Arab world before. Qatar has shown the world that advertising is not just a banner, a TVC, or a social media campaign. It's a weapon of diplomacy, a tool of politics, a theater of emotions, and at the same time, the language of the future. Here, a billboard becomes a manifesto, and a TV spot, a poem. Here, an influencer doesn't just sell a watch. He sells a lifestyle woven into the state's vision. Here, advertising doesn't chase the customer. It leads them, like a guide through a museum of luxury. But Qatar has its price. This world is not for everyone. Most people living here consume someone else's dreams Only a few create them. That's why advertising in Qatar is a game of elites. A game where every image, every slogan, and every sound must be tuned to the ear that truly decides. Did it work? Yes. Qatar is no longer a small dot on a desert map. It's a name billions recognize, and whether you love it or hate it, that was the point. Because in a world where the winner is the one who's remembered, Qatar has written its own book of advertising. The only question now is, who will try to copy it first? And is it even possible to copy something that, by its very nature, is an original?